Yes. Hello, guys. How are you doing? I hope everything is great. Today, we're going to talk about the schedules of mating. Is a chapter in the Rational Male, the book we are reading. It's considered the Bible of the Red Pill. The schedules of mating is a special chapter because this is where Rollo Tomassi starts talking about dual mating strategy. He slowly starts entering the evolutionary psychology area of things, which is very important. And today we're going to talk about this. So, before entering the chapter, what was dual mating strategy? It was basically what we were calling the alpha fox beta bucks in the red pill terminology, more commonly used way of its interpretation in scientific language is more like good dad and good genes. Good genes are the alpha side, good dad is the beta side. So what the dual mating strategy says, women optimally looks for a good dad with good genes. Good genes are the alpha side, which means he is like athletic enough, strong enough. He has good quality genes because the more quality genes the offspring will have, it will higher its chances to survive, right? And after the good genes, only receiving the good genes is not enough for women. They also need protection, provisioning, and parental investment. And this is where the good dad dynamic starts being important. So ideally, this is what women want in a as a mating strategy. This is what they're looking for. A good dad with good genes. But as you know, we are in a masculinity crisis. Those men were always rare, but they are rarer now. So if a guy has good genes, he's probably not a good dad material. And it is also scientifically proven that a better genes a man has, lesser his chances to have a tendency to have a tendency to father a child, father an offspring. And so, what women need to do in order to survive, they needed to adapt this tendency of men, right? Because they need to secure uh, good genes, and they also need to find a man to take care of the offspring that will born from those good genes. Ideally, what they would want is a man who possesses both abilities, both qualities. But they were always rare. Now they're rarer. So what they do, they first secure the good genes from the alpha, and then they find a beta provider, and he takes care of the good genes that she secured from the alpha. And so this was, I guess, known from the early 2000s, but recent. In the upcoming years, another hypothesis came up, and that is called mate switching hypothesis. So this was a lot of people have been perceiving this strategy as something that negates or debunks the dual mating strategy, and this is how they talked about it. This is how people present it in social media and stuff like that. But no, eventually, why the mate switching hypothesis came to the equation is because a dual mating strategy was not enough to explain all the tendencies of female mating strategy, right? Of course, it explains very important parts of it, but it's not the only aspect of it. So they brought it up as another explanation, as a side uh, hypothesis. They were supposed to not negating each other, but it was a complement to one another in order to explain what female nature is. A lot of people have misunderstood this, and they thought the mate switching hypothesis was something that debunks the dual mating strategy, but it actually wasn't. So, but recently a new study has been made, from someone called Mackin Murphy. Is an interesting name. Sounds like mac and cheese. He published a study, and the data of that study shows that there are more proof for dual mating strategy, but there were literally no proof for mate switching hypothesis. I forgot to talk about what it basically was mate switching hypothesis. So basically, these two two uh, ideas, these two hypotheses, they are found from the studies of female cheating. They are making a study about female cheating, and they're looking at the possible consequences, and these are the results of those studies. So mate switching hypothesis was basically women cheat in order to go for a better potential prospect. So they cheat their men in order to monkey branch and find a guy who has better parental investment and better protection and provisioning, more willing to do those things. But this data that we are going to look for, it proves that in that study, when women cheat, they basically care nothing about the guy they're cheating with, nothing of his qualities but his good genes. So they basically cheat only because the guy looks hot. And when they look at the data, they see that the guy that they're cheating to was actually better, richer, and like in better in other qualities, but they are cheating just because the other guy looks hotter. So this is where the good gene dynamic enters. So let's look at this study. McMurphy says people who cheat are generally more physically attracted to their affair partners, but see their primary partners as better parents, suggesting infidelity serves a dual mating strategy. No evidence for the mate switching hypothesis. So, this is a new study proving that there is no evidence for mate switching hypothesis. And this is very interesting because it's not that there are little evidence, but there is no evidence, right? And this data from this study proves that there's a dual mating strategy. Let's look. In here, he talks about why we should trust this study. I'm not going to read about that. Now he's defining what the dual mating strategy is here. He says, now let's get into it. For those not familiar with the dual mating strategy, it typically suggests that women prioritize conceptive benefits, example, good genes, sexy sons, in affair partners, and parental investment, example, good dad qualities in primary partners. So exactly as I said in the beginning of the video. So they are looking for good genes because good genes means sexy sons. Sexy sons meaning more chances of mating for the offspring. And this means the genes survive and they continue to go to the next generation. And it optimizes female hypergamy. But only having good genes isn't enough, because the guy that females secure the good genes, he might not want to uh, have do parental investment to the woman that they bred with. Typically, good genes is indicated by good looks. Here's why. So this is a paper from a study. Let's read. For those outside of this research area, and the focus on physical attractiveness in the past research and in ours may seem peculiar. To clarify, conventionally attractive features, God, in men are thought to be conventions partially because liking them confers benefits on a woman and her offspring, making them more likely to survive and reproduce. Depending on the feature in question, desirable aesthetics may honestly reflect some combination of a current health, an absence of some heritable disorders, and the ability to develop stably despite environmental insults. Handsome aesthetics can also advertise one's capacity to acquire the nutrients necessary to produce costly traits, example, large body size, and fight and forage means muscularity. Thus, good looks may advertise practical, partially heritable traits like to help produce fit offspring. Since physical attractiveness is heritable, sexy traits, even when sexy for arbitrary reasons, are also hypothesized to have a self enforcing utility through producing attractive offspring whose fitness will benefit from the social and mating related perks associated with being more attractive. While specific claims about the fitness benefits of specific traits are often controversial, what matters for dual mating theorists is that attractive physical traits can signal heritable benefits of some sort. So, continue. So, Mackin says, our findings, a fair partner equals hotter primary partner equals better dad, were the best case scenario for dual mating. Lack of sex differences may suggest men also prioritize conceptive benefits extra pair and parental benefits in pair. More on that in the full texts. So I think here is talking about this evidence may suggest, is a suggestion that men can also have a similar kind of tendency. Is 2020, but AMO, some of the skepticism about dual mating has been unwarranted. Much of the revisionism comes from our field's broad failure to replicate the ovulatory shift studies. But ovulatory shifts a are just a sub hypothesis. Dual mating doesn't need it. Other skepticism comes from low extra pair paternity in industrialized samples. I'm not sure about this argument against dual mating for a few reasons. So, in here, he's defending dual mating against some criticisms. And let's read the paper. Further, Buss criticized the good genes hypothesis on the grounds that it doesn't seem to describe what women are doing. In large samples where paternity is not disputed, the rates of extra pair paternity are low, with results are exceeding 3%. However, this is an unusual rebuttal for evolutionary psychologists, as a core tenet of their field is that there is a mismatch between our evolved behaviors and our modern environment, and these studies are often drawn from populations with contraceptives. Research on extra pair paternity in populations with less contraceptive usage often report more substantial rates, up to 5% among the AKA, 9% among the Yanomamo, and 48% among Himba. I don't know what is this, but let's pretend. This highlights the limitations of this debate's conspicuously veered samples. Sensu. If these higher rates represent our ancestry, women had ample opportunity and reason to select extra pair partners with the best genes possible. Indeed, even a 1 2% rate could be meaningful to selection, especially if reconsidered relative to the minority of mothers who have affairs rather than all mothers, and as a strategy success rate rather than an attempt rate. I'm just reading it for you guys. I'm not sure if I understood all of it. Continues. Its chief rival, the mate switching hypothesis, predicts that women cheat up. We treated backup mating separately for a better mate. Well, in our sample, women did not think their affair partner was better overall. In fact, he was not better in any way other than looks. So this is the primary data that disproves mate switching hypothesis, which was a lot of the red pill people were saying that it was horse shit. Apparently, it was. Maybe not surprising, as while it's a clever hypothesis, much of the evidence for it circumstantial or comes from women who haven't had affairs. In women who have had affairs, its predictions have now been tested twice. That said, while I think dual mating has more explanatory power than mate switching, I actually think approaching human infidelity in search of a primary explanation is too simplistic. Exactly. And even in the red pill sphere, we never really defended that this is the only explanation for female nature, and it is true 100% of the time. People cheat as a tactic, not as a strategy. For instance, in some ecologies, women use infidelity as a tactic to obtain additional resources more so than good genes. For more on this, see Brooks Selza's work, which I really admire and which we have discussed at length. And in our sample, infidelity function as a tactic serving a variety of strategies was evident from our qualitative data. Notice that one woman said she cheated precisely because she lacked investment. Hard to argue she was pairing good genes with good investment. To recap, we tested the dual mating strategy against the mate switching hypothesis. Dual mating was supported in both sexes, mate switching was not. But cheating is a tool that can be put towards many purposes, including sometimes switching mates. And this is my first pub, and it wouldn't have been possible without my peers and supervisor, especially at Oxford and the University of Melbourne, and especially this person, Candace Blake. Okay, this was Macken's first uh, article that he have published, apparently. So this is the study, and with this study, now we know more than ever that dual mating strategy is indeed true. Now let's look at this. There is no common argument on the interpretation of the association between dominance and attractiveness. Some researchers have suggested that the high mating value of dominant men is a result of their tendency to reaching higher socio-economical status and therefore gaining the resources that they may invest in their mate and offspring. Alternatively, dominance has been suggested to honestly reflect male genetic quality. Tendency to dominate is a risky strategy in competitive encounters and is associated with higher levels of testosterone, which may reduce immunocompetence in various species. Dominance could therefore reliably indicate male condition. There is also evidence that males of high genetic quality have a tendency for lower parental investment. In response, a mixed mating strategy may have evolved in females. They prefer genetically superior males as short-term or extra pair sexual partners, while at the same time they seek males who are more willing to invest in their offspring as long-term or social partners. This interpretation is consistent with our findings that women in stable relationships have a strong tendency to prefer the smell of dominant men when in the fertile phase of their cycle, while single women and all women in non fertile phases lack this preference. So, when we look at all this, we see that the dual mating strategy may have evolved in women in order to adapt the male tendencies because apparently this study, which I don't know its name, someone sent it to me. It says that males that have better genetics has lesser tendencies to invest into the offspring that they will breed with. Yeah. So let's start reading the schedules of mating as we looked for all the studies that had been made for this strategy. Now we can read what Rollo Tomassi says about it. Schedules of mating. And there are methods and social conventions women have used for centuries to ensure that the best male's genes are selected and secured with the best male provisioning she is capable of attracting. Ideally, the best man should exemplify both, as I said. So this is not like women are trying to cheat actively. All of them are trying to find a separate man with good genes and a separate man with uh, a separate man that is a good dad. No, this is not what they are intentionally doing. None of this is intentional, but it's more what we could say for this instinctual. These are more instinctual behaviors. Ideally, the best man should exemplify both, but rarely do the two exist in the same male, and particularly these days. So this is the problem of the modern generation. We have a masculinity crisis, and probably we're living in an era where the cheating is most popular. It is because now women have more reasons to cheat because there are not good men with good genes. There are either men with good genes, which is their innate desire to breed with. When we talk about sex, the desire to breed, women don't think about how good of a personality you are. And I'm talking about this as an instinctual level because arousal is something evolutionary. And in an evolutionary sense, arousal happens when there's a good gene, there are good genes in the female's environment. So women want to breed with good genes. It's not your personality, it's not your big heart. They would those things would want you those things would make you a long-term potential good long-term partner, but they wouldn't necessarily make you a good breeding partner in a completely evolutionary sense. So, in the interest of achieving her biological imperative, and prompted by an innate need for security, the feminine as a whole had to develop social conventions and methodologies which change as her environment and personal conditions do to affect this. Not only are men up against the female genetic imperative, but also centuries old feminine social conventions established and adapt from a time long before human beings could accurately determine genetic origins. I've detailed in many of my blog posts that mate selection is a psychobiological function that millennia of evolution has hardwired into the psyches of both sexes. So internalized and socialized is this process into our collective unconsciousness that we rarely recognize we are subject to these motivators, even when we repeatedly manifest the same behaviors prompted by them. Example, woman having a second kid with the alpha bad boy. It is simple deductive logic to follow that for a species to survive, it must provide its offspring with the best possible conditions to ensure its survival. This is the good bad part. Either that or to reproduce in such quantity that it ensures survival. The obvious application of this for women is sharing parental investment with the best possible mate she can attract and who can provide long term security for her and any potential offspring. That's why women have a genetic and instinctual tendency to use their sexuality to manipulate a man who has lesser what's this uh forgot experience. They have a genetic tendency to manipulate men who has lesser sexual experience. It's easier for them to manipulate men like this. Because when a man has sexual experience with many women, he's going to be less prompt to be manipulated by any woman's sexuality. Thus, women are biologically, psychologically, and sociologically the filters of their own reproduction, whereas man's reproductive methodology is to scatter as much of his genetic material as humanly possible to the widest pool of sexually available females. He, of course, has his own criteria for mating selection and determining the best genetic pairing for his reproduction. Example, she's got to be hot, but his criteria is certainly less discriminating than of a woman. Example, no one's ugly after 2 a.m. This is evidenced in our own hormonal biology. Healthy men possess between 12 and 17 times the amount of testosterone, the primary hormone in sexual arousal, women do, and women produce substantially more estrogen, instrumental in sexual caution, and oxytocin, fostering feelings of security and nurturing than men. So when we look at this, it's like we men, we literally have little to no preference for the woman we would like to sleep with, except that she is hot. If she is hot and if she's into it, if she's hot and if she's available, go for it. This is what male brain thinks about his sexuality. But for females, sex is way more dangerous because they're bearing a child and they might die. So that's why they're more choosing, they're more picky. That stated, both of these methodologies conflict in practice. For a woman to best ensure the survival of her offspring, a man must necessarily abandon his method of reproduction in favor of her own. This then sets a contradictory imperative for him to pair with a woman who will satisfy his methodology. A male must sacrifice his reproductive schedule to satisfy that of the woman he pairs with. Thus, with so much genetic potential at stake on his part of the risk, he wants not only to ensure that she is the best possible candidate for breeding and future breeding, but also to know that his progeny will benefit from both parents' investment. And he also wants to know if the offspring will be his, right? And there was no way of knowing this, uh, like up to 30 years ago, maybe 50 years ago. So that's why virginity was very important in many societies. Side note, one interesting outcome of this psychobiological dynamic is men's ability to spot their own children in a crowd of other children more quickly and with greater acuity than even their mothers. This is interesting. So apparently, us guys, when we are if when we are fathers, when we have children, we can spot our children inside amongst a crowd very easily and very faster than women. I didn't know that. Apparently, there were studies about it. Studies have shown that men have the ability to more quickly and accurately identify their own children in a room full of kids dressed in the same uniforms than the mothers of the child. Again, this stresses the subconscious importance of this genetic trade off. I guess this is because when a man uh, starts to enters into a monogamic relationship with a woman, he's no longer breeding with other women, right? So he has only one or two children. So he's genetically more inclined to protect them and ensure that they're alive. Because if they die, then he cannot, his genes cannot go to the further generation. These are the rudiments of human sexual selection and reproduction. Obviously, there are many other social, emotional, and psychological intricacies that are associated with these fundamentals. This is for you red pill haters who think we look like we only see things in one way and we are not other to other possible scenarios and possibilities. In the book itself says this is not the only explanation, but this is an explanation and a very important one. But these are the underlying motivations and considerations that subconsciously influence sexual selection. And that's why you must know. Social conventions. To counter this subconscious dynamic to their own genetic advantage, women initiate social conventions and psychological schemas to better facilitate their own breeding methodologies. This is why women always hate the prerogative to change her mind. No, this is why women always have the prerogative to change her mind. And the most fickle of behaviors become socially excusable while men's behavior is constrained to a higher standard of responsibility to do the right thing, which is invariably to the advantage of a woman's reproductive strategy. And this is why guys who are players and fathers who abandon mothers to pursue their innate reproduction method are villains, and the fathers who selflessly sacrifice themselves financially, emotionally, and life decision wise, even to the benefit of the children they didn't father, are considered social heroes for complying with women's genetic imperatives. This is also the root motivation for female specific social dynamics, such as let's just be friends rejections and women's propensity for victimhood, as they've learned that this engenders savior mental schemes for men's breeding schedules. So, this is a very important thing. Why women always play the victim when you met a new woman, when they talk about their abusive ex boyfriends or husbands. And why do you think they do that? Because they inherently know that making themselves a victim will awaken your savior instincts. So you will be more willing to be with her and you will invest more into her emotionally, physically, whateverly. All right? This is Cap and Save a Hoe and even marriage itself. Good dad, good dads versus good genes. The two greatest difficulties for women to overcome in their own methodology is that they are only at a sexually viable peak for a short window of time, generally their early 20s, and the fact that the qualities that make a good long-term partner, the good dad, and the qualities that make for good breeding stock, good genes, only rarely manifest themselves in the same male. Provisioning and security potential are fantastic motivators for pairing with a good dad, but the same characteristics that make him such The same characteristics that make him such are generally a disadvantage when compared with the man who better exemplifies genetics, physical attraction, and the risk taking qualities that would imbue her child with a better capacity to adapt to its environment, meaning stronger, faster, more attractive than others to ensure the passing of her own genetic material to future generations. This is the jerk versus nice guy paradox, writ large on an evolutionary scale. Men and women innately, though unconsciously, understand this dynamic. So, in order for a woman to have the best that the good dad has to offer, while taking advantage of the best that the good genes man has, she must invent and constantly modify social conventions to keep the advantage in her biological favor and in accordance with her pluralistic sexual strategy. Reproductive schedules. This paradox then necessitates that women, and by default men, must subscribe to short term and long term schedules of mating. Short term schedules facilitate breeding with the good genes male, while long term breeding is reserved the good dad male. This convention and the psychosocial schemes that accompany it are precisely why women will marry the nice guy, stable, loyal, preferably doctor, and still fuck the pool boy or the cute surfer she met on the spring break. In our genetic past, a male with good genes implied an ability to be a good provider, but modern convention has thwarted this, so new social and mental schemes had to be developed for women. Cheating. For this dynamic and the practicality of enjoying the best of both genetic worlds, women find it necessary to cheat. This cheating can be done proactively and reactively. In the reactive model, a woman who has already paired with her long term partner choice engages in an extramarital or extra pairing sexual intercourse with a short term partner, meaning the cheating wife or girlfriend. That's not to say this short term opportunity cannot develop into a second long term mate, but the action of infidelity itself is a method for securing better genetic stock than the committed male provider is capable of supplying. Proactive cheating is the single mommy dilemma. This form of cheating relies on the woman breeding with a good genes male, bearing his children, and then abandoning him or having him abandon her, again, through invented social conventions. This is going to be, this is the society will make it easier for her to abandon him in order to find a good dad to male to provide for her and his children for her good genes partner to ensure their security. I want to stress again that most women do not have some consciously constructed and recognized master plan to enact this cycle and deliberately trap men into it. This is a desire that awakens in them, and some women do it, some women don't, but all of them feel this desire if certain situations and certain dynamics occur. Rather, the motivations for this behavior and the accompanying social rationales invented to justify it are an unconscious process. For the most part, women are unaware of this dynamic, but are nonetheless subject to its influence. For a female of any species to facilitate a methodology for breeding with the best genetic partner she is able to attract, and to ensure her own and her offspring's survival with the best provisioning partner, is an evolutionary jackpot. Cuckoldry. On some level of consciousness, men innately sense something is wrong with this situation, though they may not be able to place why they feel it or misunderstand it in the confusion of women's justifications for it. Or they become frustrated by the social pressures to do the right thing, are shamed into martyrdom saviorhood, and committed to a feigned responsibility to these conventions. Again, women make a genetic mistake, a sexual mistake, and men are there to make it up for her. Men are there to save her from her mistakes. Men are there to save her from the consequences of her mistakes, and this is considered as a right thing, and the men who does this are considered heroes in society. Nevertheless, some see it well enough to steer clear of single mothers, either by prior experience or observing other male cuckolds saddled with the responsibility of raising and providing for, no matter how involved or uninvolved, another man's successful reproduction efforts with this woman. This was very interesting. I'm going to tell you uh, a story of mine. I have this friend here in Brazil, Palmas Tocantins. He is, I think, a missionary slash pastor kind of guy. And one day I was talking with him about single mothers, I think. And if I don't know, his sister was a single mother and then married this guy. Uh, so the guy is taking care of her children and adopting the children as his, but the children is not his. While we're talking about this, I am trying to be more. I'm keeping my red pilled ideas to myself when I'm talking with Christians because I know that they might get triggered easily. So, but in this case, I couldn't hold myself, and I said, don't you think this is a little bit disadvantageous for a guy to uh, be a father for another for children that is not his? But he was like immediately responded to me by saying, "No, bro, it's not, because some jackass impregnated her and left her, and now she's alone and defenseless, and she needs a guy to take care of him. And this is what we do as Christians, and this is a right thing to do. We are here to serve other people and some shit like that." So no, I don't disagree with all the Christian notion that we need to take care of other people, and we need to do good for society. But what intrigued me about his thinking was he immediately gave the responsibility of the guy that impregnated her and dumped her, but he gave no responsibility to the woman that had chose to be with him in the first place. So we tend to, in society, we tend to uh, free women from their choices. They are being with men that uh, they should despise, but they're choosing to be with them. They choose to breed with them, and then they're victims because the guy beated them or the guy left them uh, with their children. But you chose to be with them. It's your like have some accountability. You chose to be with them, but no, she's a victim. She's a victim because that jackass manipulated her, entered into her mind, and impregnated her and left her alone with the kids. Now she's alone and defenseless and needs protection from a real man. So this is what the thinking is. And again, this is Matrix using male protective instincts in order to use them to optimize female sexual strategy. But in reality, you don't need to take care of someone else's kids. You don't need to marry a single mother. And it's fine if you don't. And you can't be held responsible for someone else's mistakes. It is perfectly fine for you to want to be with someone who has no other kids from another man. And you don't need to be the savior. And just because you're the savior doesn't mean you're better. Continue. Men often fall into the role of the proactive or reactive cuckold. He will never enjoy the same benefits as his mate's short term partners to the same degree. So, this is the situation. That's why we say never negotiate the genuine desire in the red pill, because in order to have a healthy relationship, you would want your woman to desire you organically, as organic as possible, and you would like her to have genuine burning desire towards you. And in evolutionary, in psychological sense, this can only happen if she would perceive you as good gene material. And if she wouldn't perceive you as such, then she's gonna have sex with you for other reasons. But those reasons are not going to be because she has genuine burning desire for you. And this means that she don't really desire to have sex with you. She desires something else. She desires maybe marriage. She desires children. She desires protection. She desires to get out of her father's house. Anything could be possible. God, who knows what a motivation of a woman could be. But those motivations, although they are varied, they're not going to be because of genuine burning desire. And that's why you deserve you deserve a woman to desire you as organically and as fierce and passionate as possible. You deserve to experience these kind of these kind of relationships, intimacy. And that's why you shouldn't be looking for long you shouldn't be looking for a long-term partner per se, although there's nothing to be in a long-term relationship. This is the reason why we tell you don't rush into a relationship, because when you focus your mind that you need to marry or you need to have a long-term relationship in order to have any intimacy with any woman, now you're risking your chances. Your chances are higher than ever to find a woman that will only use you for her long-term interests, but she has other people in mind for her short-term partners. He will never enjoy the same benefits as his mate's short-term partners to the same degree in the way of sexual desire or immediacy of it, while at the same time enduring the social pressures of having to provide for this good genes father's progeny. It could be argued that he may contribute minimally to their welfare, but on some level, whether emotional, physical, financial, or educational, he will contribute some effort for another man's genetic stock in exchange for a mitigated form of sexual intimacy from the mother. To some degree, even if only by his presence, he is sharing the parental investments that should be borne by the short term partner. If nothing else, he contributes the time and effort to her. He could be better invested in finding a sexual partner with which he could pursue his own genetic imperative by his own methodology. So it is better for you to find a woman that enthusiastically wants to have sex with you, wants to carry your children. She didn't have any kids from any other guy. Actually, what is best for you is to be a good dad that has good genes. This is a very rare male model, but you can be both. At least you can move towards that direction. However, needless to say, there is no shortage of men sexually deprived enough to see past the long term disadvantages and not only rewarding but reinforcing a single mother's bad decisions, bad from his own interests perspective, with regard to her breeding selections and schedules in exchange for short term sexual gratification. So, this is why female social conventions and matrix are trying to put men under mentality of a mentality of absence. This is why all the soulmate myth, one-itis narrative, and everything is imposed on men, because more men are there enough to save women from their bad decisions, and in order to do that, you must make men, you must take their sexual choices. So if they would have only one woman, and if they would be thankful to God because they managed to secure one woman, and it's going to be easier for them, easier for society to use these men to match with the woman who made bad reproductive choices. So it kind of balances the society in this way. And furthermore, by reinforcing her behavior thusly, he reinforces the social convention for both men and women. It's important to bear in mind that in this age, women are ultimately solely responsible for the men they choose to mate with, bearing rape, of course, and giving birth to their children. Men do bear responsibility for their actions, no doubt, but it is ultimately the decision of the female and her judgment that decides her and her children's fate. Why? Because they are ultimately responsible to whom they are going to have sex with, and to whom they are going to breed with and to have his children, right? There are almost more than 50 ways of protection for women, and there's only two for men. You can either have a condom, or you can cut the stuff so you can't reproduce at all, and which we don't recommend the second one. Uh, anyway, thank you so much for listening. I think it is enough for today. If there are any more questions, I can answer them. Uh, Related or non-related doesn't really matter, but it must be in English. So bring them in if you have any questions. If not, see you in our next video. What? What happened? Oh, we forgot to have coffee. God. Great. It's 5:54. Do you think we can catch? Do you think I can catch it? Guys, there's no coffee in the house. This is an emergency. I need to go get some coffee before the coffee shop closes. Okay, thank you so much for listening to me. And if you like this video, please make sure to press the like button, subscribe to my channel, and yeah, see you for the next videos. We will be continuing to read The Rational Male, and we are still in the chapter 1, by the way. The next chapter, we are going to read Buffers, and a very important chapter talks about rejection is better than regret. And this is one of the principles that men need to internalize so bad. And this is one of the problems where I had faced throughout my single life. This is what we will study in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening. See you on the next video.